Russian officials continue to make irresponsible statements regarding Russia's nuclear forces, and we assess that they are doing it to intimidate our allies and us. These have failed. If anything, they have really strengthened the NATO alliance solidarity. Moscow continues to violate the INF Treaty in our estimation, and our goal is to return them to compliance to preserve the viability of that treaty. Under any circumstances, however, we will not allow them to gain significant military advantage through INF violations. We are developing and analyzing response options for the President, and we're consulting with our allies on the best way forward here. Now, let me just say this about Russian military doctrine that sometimes is described as escalate to de-escalate. Anyone who thinks that they can control escalation through the use of nuclear weapons is literally playing with fire. Escalation is escalation, and nuclear use would be the ultimate escalation. As Secretary Carter recently said, Moscow's nuclear saber-rattling raises questions about Russia's commitment to strategic stability and the profound caution and respect that world leaders in the nuclear age have shown towards the brandishing of these weapons. China is also doing nuclear upgrades. They're placing multiple warheads on their ICBMs. They're expanding their mobile ICBM force. They continue to pursue a sea-based element for their nuclear forces. However, we assess that this modernization program is designed to ensure they have a second strike capability and not to seek a quantitative nuclear parity with the United States or Russia. North Korea, they continue to expand their nuclear weapons and missile programs, and in response, we continue to improve our national missile defenses and conventional counterforce options, and our current plans will keep us ahead of North Korean capabilities in our estimation. So given the importance of nuclear weapons as well as this volatile 21st century national security environment, the President has directed that we maintain a safe, secure, and reliable triad of strategic nuclear delivery systems while adjusting the force levels to the New START treaty. This is the highest priority for the Department of Defense. We've developed a plan to transition our aging systems. As the Chairman said, they all are they're reaching the time where they will age out. Carrying out this plan is going to be a very expensive proposition, and we recognize that. It's projected to cost DoD an average of $18 billion a year from 2021 through 2035 in FY16 dollars. Without additional funding dedicated to strategic force modernization, sustaining this level of spending will require very, very hard choices and will impact the other parts of the defense portfolio, particularly our conventional mission capability. Now, this modernization we have delayed, and we cannot do further any delays without putting the safety, security, and effectiveness of our forces at risk. So the choice that we're facing, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman and members, is that keeping the existing force or modernizing the force, the choice right now is modernizing or losing deterrent capability in the 2020s and 2030s. That's the stark choice that we're faced with. We appreciate that this committee has recognized this problem, including legislation to establish a strategic deterrent fund. We now believe we have to decide how to resource the fund and the challenge we think we need to talk about and how we solve this, because it is a very pressing issue. So I look forward to discussing this issue with you and the other Defense Oversight Committees, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Secretary Sherwood-Randall, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Member Smith and members of the committee, Mr. Rogers as well, who I had the privilege of traveling with to our Idaho National Lab. I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the Department of Energy's role in supporting U.S. nuclear deterrence in the 21st century. Secretary of Energy Moniz and I appreciate the priority that this committee places on nuclear matters, given their significance to our national security and the emphasis that President Obama has placed on ensuring the safety, security, and effectiveness of our nuclear weapons as we seek to reduce global nuclear dangers. Today's hearing is an important step in our ongoing effort to build a strong national consensus on the role for and management of the United States nuclear deterrent. I'm honored to testify alongside my two close colleagues from the Department of Defense, The Departments of Energy and Defense share a solemn responsibility for delivering the nuclear deterrent, and we work on this in tandem, with DOE providing the weapons and DoD providing the delivery systems. Our two agencies collaborate through the Nuclear Weapons Council to improve communication and to increase coordination throughout the budget cycle. Our cooperation is strong and deliberate, as you will hear today. This cooperation depends upon the leadership of experienced members of our military, like Admiral Sandy Winnefeld, who, as the chairman noted, will be retiring after 4 years as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the end of July. It has been a privilege to work closely with Admiral Winnefeld throughout the administration, and we've joined forces frequently on issues of direct relevance to this hearing. I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank Sandy for his many years of extraordinary and dedicated service to our nation. We are all aware that the United States and our allies and partners face grave and growing nuclear dangers. As President Obama said in his April 2009 Prague speech, the threat of nuclear war has gone down, but the risk of nuclear attack has gone up. With these dangers in mind, the Obama administration has set forth a clear two-pronged nuclear strategy. First, we must reduce the threat of nuclear proliferation. And second, we must maintain a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent. At DOE, we are charged with playing a significant role in implementing both elements of the President's nuclear strategy. This is a no-fail mission in which we must provide a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent without explosive nuclear testing, while also preventing, countering, and responding to proliferation and nuclear terrorism around the world. Indeed, as the United States reduces its nuclear arsenal, DOE's responsibility for maintaining the arsenal's safety, security, and effectiveness becomes all the more important. Infrastructure modernization and the ongoing stockpile stewardship and management program, undergirded by sound science and advanced technology, are necessary to ensure the ability of the United States to meet 21st century threats. The Stockpile Stewardship Program is one of DOE's most remarkable achievements of the past 2 decades. Every year, DOE has enabled the Secretaries of Defense and Energy, together with the directors of Livermore, Los Alamos, and Sandia National Laboratories, the Nuclear Weapons Council, and the commander of the U.S. Strategic Command, to certify to the President that our nuclear stockpile is safe, secure, and reliable. And for the past 20 years, DOE's scientific and technological expertise has achieved this without explosive nuclear testing. In fact, our labs now know more about the physics of the inner workings of the stockpile than they ever did during the days of explosive nuclear testing. Our life extension programs and alterations refurbish, reuse, and replace nuclear components to extend the lifespan of our existing nuclear arsenal, and to ensure their continued safety and effectiveness. To maintain confidence in our nuclear arsenal, we must continue to invest in the uniquely skilled nuclear security workforce, as well as the science and infrastructure essential to stockpile stewardship. DOE's National Nuclear Security Administration is responsible for the nuclear security enterprise infrastructure necessary to sustain the stockpile and execute all of our nuclear missions. Some of the physical infrastructure dates back to the days of the Manhattan Project. As many of you have seen with your own eyes, much of it is degrading, has exceeded its useful life, and is in need of substantial maintenance or replacement. Equally important, more than 50% of the NNSA federal workforce will be eligible to retire in the next 5 to 7 years. This wave of retirements requires us to recapitalize our workforce with a successor generation of outstanding talent that is able to carry forward our nuclear mission in this century. Building a responsive infrastructure requires investing in our people, as well as in our new facilities, especially for plutonium and uranium, as well as high explosives, non-nuclear component production, and requisite laboratory and office workspace. Secretary Moniz and I have made reducing the maintenance backlog a key element of the Department's overall infrastructure strategy, and we seek your support for this as well as for the new construction that we need. Your recognition of our critical mission and your support for the life extension programs and a modernized infrastructure are critical to American national security and to the security of our allies and partners around the world. More broadly, the Secretary and I see the implementation of recommendations of the Congressional Advisory Panel on NNSA Governance, also known as the Meese-Augustine Report, as a top priority and one that will enhance our efforts across the nuclear security enterprise. Under Secretary Moniz's leadership, DOE and NNSA have already taken several significant steps to improve the operation and management of the nuclear security enterprise. One of the report's significant findings was the need to rebuild national leadership focus on nuclear security, with a particular emphasis on strengthening regular communications with relevant congressional leaders on policy elements that make up the nuclear security mission. I, along with the NNSA Administrator, will lead the implementation group, and I look forward to working with you on this important issue. Your support for our governance agenda will be absolutely critical to our success. As I've already observed, DOE also plays a central role within the U.S. government in implementing nuclear threat reduction activities. Our portfolio of work aimed at preventing, countering, and responding to global nuclear threats is rooted in our capabilities to develop and sustain the U.S. nuclear stockpile and enables us to implement this important dimension of the Prague Agenda. These activities are defense by other means. When we take fissile material off the global playing field or work discreetly to help countries to do a better job of protecting the fissile material that they retain, we defend ourselves and those who share our values from those who would do us harm. For example, NNSA's Office of Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation has safely and securely removed or confirmed the disposition of over 5,359 kilograms of highly enriched uranium and plutonium around the world, which is enough material for more than 200 nuclear weapons. In conclusion, as Deputy Secretary Work has already noted, our nation faces numerous strategic challenges, including the continuous expansion of the Russian and Chinese nuclear programs. In the wake of several difficult years of constrained budgets and fiscal uncertainty, we cannot afford to delay the investments we need to make in our nuclear security enterprise. With your support, we can sustain nuclear deterrence in the 21st century. I thank you for the opportunity to testify today on this vitally important national security issue, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Admiral?
Chairman Thornberry and distinguished members of the committee, I just missed Ranking Member Smith, but thank you, Mr. Langevin. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective on nuclear deterrence, and sir, thank you for your kind words earlier. Very much appreciated. Chairman Dempsey and I view national security decision-making, whether it's the use of force, resource allocation, or assignment of risk, through the lens of a set of prioritized national security interests. It goes without saying, as Deputy Secretary Work alluded, that the survival of our nation ranks first among those interests, followed closely by the need to prevent catastrophic attacks on our nation. Additionally, our extended deterrence commitments help cover our interest in assuring our non-nuclear allies that their security interests will be protected without developing their own nuclear capabilities. It follows that tending to the health of our nuclear deterrent force is the most important thing that we do, representing, as it does, our only way to deter an existential attack from a major nation state, and one of several ways of deterring a smaller attack from a lesser state, and also to assure our allies. We principally accomplish this through our long-proven triad and a combination of forward-deployed weapons and delivery platforms in Europe and the ability to rapidly do the same in the Pacific. However, while our deterrent is healthy today, three factors are contributing to our concern for its future health. First, at the end of the Cold War, many felt that the international system had evolved to the point where a nuclear deterrent was obsolete. However, recent events remind us of the necessity of maintaining a reliable and capable deterrent, including a triad, for as long as nuclear weapons exist. We still believe that any reductions in weapons must be done in concert with our potential antagonists, because unilateral gestures of goodwill have little standing with authoritarian regimes. Second, all three legs of our deterrent, their supporting command and control structure, and many of the weapons they employ are coming due for recapitalization within a natural cycle. The fact is that systems age and need to be refreshed, modernized, or replaced. Russia is going through this exact same experience right now. But the unfortunate coincident timing for us, also alluded to by Deputy Secretary Work, in the coming years presents a large bill over a relatively short period of time. And third, this is all happening at a time when our resources are actually decreasing. As it stands, any remaining margin we have for investing in our nuclear deterrent has been steadily whittled away as we've pushed investments further and further into the future. The fact is there's no slack left in the system. We will need stable, long-term funding to recapitalize this most important element of what we do. We can no longer adjust priorities inside the nuclear portfolio to make things work, to string it along. That implies that absent some other form of relief, because this is our highest security interest, we're going to have to reach into the other things we do to protect other national security interests. That's going to make many people, both inside and outside DoD, unhappy. For our part, we have been and will continue to exercise the best possible stewardship we can over our resources, and we'll continue working closely with our DOE partners to ensure the viability and affordability of warhead life extension programs and stockpile stewardship. I hope Congress will do its part to help us. Before I conclude, I'd like to thank the members of this committee for your strong support for our nation's men and women in uniform during my tenure as Vice Chairman. And thank you again for the opportunity to appear alongside my colleagues today, and I do look forward to your questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. As feared, we have votes on the floor, and so we're going to have to recess, and then we will return as soon as those votes are concluded. And so if the witnesses want to make their way to the anteroom, we will buy you a cup of coffee. I'm not promising how good it is. But with that, the committee will stand in recess, and I'd encourage members to come back right after votes.
why the deterrent is remains relevant to the fact that it's a capital asset. It's a whole host of capital assets. And like any capital asset, it needs to be maintained. It needs to be refurbished, refreshed, modernized. And as we've mentioned earlier, it's all coming due at the same time. Just as an example, I'd point out that the air-launched cruise missile was designed to last 10 years. It's lasted 2 decades beyond that 10-year initial life, and we need to recapitalize that asset. And that's just one small slice of the need to do that.
Finally, y'all have all mentioned the cost of all of these systems aging out at the same time. I think yesterday or day before yesterday, the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessment, CSBA, released at least a preliminary study entitled, "Are U.S. Nuclear Forces Unaffordable?" And their analysis, looking at various budget requests from now till FY 2039, was that at no point would the nuclear forces share of national defense be more than 5% of the defense budget. Does that sound about right based on the projections that y'all have looked at?
We believe that they did a credible study. The big difference between their estimates and ours is they only included the long-range bomber, just a small portion of the entire program for the nuclear mission. We would say that it would take 7% of our budget. Right now, we're spending about 3%. So about doubling the level of effort that we're doing now to sustain the force, it would require about 7%. They were also correct on the time where we would peak out, generally around 2026 and 2027. And I would just say, Mr. Chairman, that if you look at the last 2 times, whereas the Vice Chairman said we recapitalized this force, or recapitalized it, the peak is going to be much lower and will be spread out over a longer period of time. So it will average about $18 billion a year. The important thing that they said in that study, sir, is it's a matter of prioritization. And in both of the previous times, we've added money on top of the conventional force mission. So on a flat budget, taking that type of a hit would have a major, major impact on the defense portfolio.
Okay.
I would just add, I think we differ on the numbers a little bit from that report. It's about 3 to 4% to maintain what we have, and around 7% to maintain what we have and modernize what we have. And I think that it's important to get that number out.
Yeah, and I appreciate the difference is how you assign the long-range bomber. But regardless, whether it's 5 or 7% for the highest priority for our national security, it seems to me like it's not completely unreasonable to say that that's in the ballpark.
And sir, if I could just add, we've already lost about 10% over the last few years with BCA. Yeah. Stack that on top of it. And the one thing I do agree with the CSBA study on is that if we don't find some other outside relief on this, then we will have to take it out of somewhere else in the defense budget, as the deputy said, as you said. Yep. And there are going to be a lot of people who aren't happy about that because other missions that are important to this country are going to get pushed aside.
Fair point. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing, and I would like to add my welcome to the witnesses. It's great to have such a distinguished panel before us, and it's great to hear this ringing affirmation for the importance of America's nuclear deterrence, because it's our most important mission, but sometimes a forgotten one, and I appreciate your stressing it to this committee and to the public at large. One of the latest estimates we got was it will take at least $355 billion just to maintain our nuclear stockpile and all the things that go along with it for the next 10 years. And we in Congress have gotten in the bad habit of not paying for things. We really haven't fully funded our military in 15 years. We haven't had a fully funded highway bill in 8 years. So I'm hopeful that my colleagues will hear this message of the importance of this deterrent and not only support it, but start funding it, and start funding it now on a regular schedule. I congratulate the Obama administration because they've taken this very seriously and have funded these priorities. I just hope that as we go through the conference, which I'm proud that our chairman is chairing on the NDAA, we will be able to figure out better solutions for fully funding and not pretending that we're funding things by relying on the so-called OCO, or Overseas Contingency Operation account. But as we deal with these important issues, there are tons of questions to ask, and it's a pleasure to work with Chairman Mike Rogers on the subcommittee where we can focus in more detail on these issues. But whether it's the newest, freshest missileer out in one of the missile fields, or a young sailor on one of the nuclear subs, or somebody who's preparing to fly a strategic bomber that in some cases with the B-52s are older than any of us on the panel, we've got a lot of work to do. But I think the hardest thing is to get the public to understand why we need to spend so much money and be so careful with these incredible weapons that we hope we will never use. That's kind of a paradox, or at least an anomaly that some people don't quite want to wrap their heads around. But I'm appreciative of y'all devoting your careers to making this nuclear deterrence real, and I hope that we will figure out ways to counter, like Vladimir Putin's doctrine of, nuclear escalatory dominance. And that's something that I see as one of the main threats, and I would welcome any of the panelists' comments on that. The best way to counter a new and a different sort of threat than perhaps we've seen before.
Well, sir, it's interesting. We have been trying to de-emphasize the role of nuclear weapons in our national strategy, whereas Russia has been trying to emphasize it. It's primarily because they believe that they are at a conventional disadvantage against us. So they emphasize that for deterrence. And what we have said is using that type of escalatory language is extremely troubling because of the dangerous implications that it has, that you might use a nuclear weapon to de-escalate a crisis. Once you escalate, and there is no way for us to be able to foresee what would happen after that. So we are asking the Russians to moderate their language and to continue to talk with us on the New START, make sure that they're in compliance on New START, and potentially even reduce the number of weapons below that.
Thank you. Mr. Forbes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for this hearing, and to each of our witnesses, thank you for your commitment to our country. Secretary Work, we are very fortunate to have you with your analytical skills and your vision for national defense, and we appreciate what you do. And Admiral, you have brought just a wealth of experience and wisdom to this position, and we thank you for that. And before you leave, I just want to pick just a little bit of that from you. And you know, part of our nuclear program is not only what we do, but what we keep others from taking from us, perhaps, or stealing from us. And we all know that China is committed to more or less stealing our lunch every day through both traditional and cyber espionage. The hack of OPM is just the latest example. Do the Chinese steal our naval technology and apply it to their Navy? And as a corollary to that, are you aware of any evidence concerning China stealing U.S. civil nuclear technology and diverting it to its nuclear Navy?
Sir, I'm not personally aware of any instances of another nation stealing our nuclear technology and applying it to their Navy, including China. That may be happening. I'm just not briefed on any intelligence that would implicate that. I think it's well understood that there is cyber espionage that occurs. We have concerns from time to time about our cleared defense contractors, for example, and their cybersecurity. And I know that Frank Kendall and AT&L is working hard to tighten that up as best we can. I was reflecting on this earlier. You know, we talk about nuclear matters. As a sort of graduate of the Navy nuclear propulsion program, one of the things that has intrigued me over the years is the element of human performance that program inculcates into its people is very applicable to protecting ourselves in the cyber world. And we're investigating how we can go about inculcating some of those principles into our workforce so that we can stop any, or at least minimize the amount of cyber espionage that we experience.
And for any of our witnesses, do you have any suggestions of steps we should take to ensure that China can't take our technology and upgrade their ballistic missile submarines or their Navy nuclear reactor technology?
I think you're referring to the China 123 provision, sir. We're very concerned, and we want to make sure that any agreement that we have on this regard, is not used to allow them to have a quieter plant, for example. But as of this point, I know of no Chinese espionage that is looking, is trying to specifically on this aspect of it. But I defer to Secretary on the China 123 if there's anything on there.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Our judgment is that the agreement protects our interests, and it also provides opportunity for our industry to have markets that are very significant for the United States and that allow us to advance the kinds of safety and performance standards that we want to see other countries adopt in their civil nuclear programs.
Good.
Thank
Well, thank you all for your service and for being here. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Langevin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony today. Admiral Winnefeld, as the Chairman noted, this may be your last appearance before the committee, and I just want to thank you for your service to our nation. You've made great contributions to our men and women in uniform and to our national security, and our nation is greatly in your debt. Madam Secretary, if I could start the question with you. In the category of good, better, best, given the fact that our adversaries are clearly modernizing their nuclear programs, how do you assess our program? Is the refurbishment program adequate enough? Is it best? Or would we be serving our nation better by designing a new nuclear warhead with all the modern safety features and surety features that we could build in, given how far technology has advanced? Or are we, is best doing what we're doing and just refurbishing?
Thank you, Mr. Langevin. We, together with the Department of Defense through the Nuclear Weapons Council, set the requirements for modernization of our stockpile. And it is our judgment that what we have committed to doing in the 3+2 strategy for modernization ensures that we will retain the deterrent capability that we need to defend the United States and our allies and partners around the world. We're confident of this work. We believe that the requirements that are presented in the 3+2 strategy will enable us to deter any adversary. It also enables us to reduce the stockpile in a way that makes it safer and more secure. And therefore, we judge that this is the right strategy going forward and are working very hard to implement it.
Thank you. I'd also like to ask some questions about non-proliferation programs. Can you describe the importance of radiation portal monitors as a component of a larger suite of technologies designed to prevent additional states and actors from acquiring nuclear materials?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer that question. These radiation portal monitors are part of what we have previously called a second line of defense program, and that is a critical part of our efforts to ensure that the movement of fissile material across borders does not go undetected, because as we know, the most important part of a country or a group's ability to build a nuclear weapon is getting access to that fissile material. And so what we want to do is ensure that everywhere possible we have detection capabilities in vulnerable places to allow us to know in real time when something may be moving so that it can be interdicted and so that it can be secured against acquisition by those who would do us harm.
Secretary Work, perhaps for you or Madam Secretary, whichever be appropriate, how would you characterize the cybersecurity measures in place to protect our nuclear enterprise, and how resilient are our systems?
The threat of cyber attack on all of our systems we take very, very seriously, sir. And obviously on nuclear issues, we take that the most seriously because they're some of the most important. As we've said, it is the most important mission we have. We are doing a wide variety of reviews on all of our systems, all of our platforms. We're concerned about our cyber vulnerabilities everywhere, and we continue to really look at it closely. Right now, I would judge it to be satisfactory.
I think we need to obviously continue to pay attention to that, and something I'm very concerned about in particular. So thank you, Secretary. Admiral Winnefeld, Does the New START Treaty remain in the U.S. national interest? Then I have some other follow-up questions if time allows.
Yes, sir. We believe the New START Treaty does remain inside our national interests. We monitor continuously other nations and their behavior. We believe that Russia is adhering to the New START Treaty, as far as we can tell. The principal value to me of that treaty is our ability to verify what it is they're doing. And we'd love to have complete transparency, but we believe the verification measures we got in that treaty are adequate for us to have a better understanding of what they're doing. So yes, sir, we do believe that the New START Treaty is still in our interest.
Thank you. To all witnesses, on the issue of verification, how important are verification detection to detect cheating? A 2014 Defense Science Board concluded that much work remains to be done on verification and detection technologies and interagency cooperation. Do you agree, and what gaps remain? And that one you may have to do for the record. It's up to you.
If y'all don't mind supplying that answer for the record, we'll try to keep moving with our limited time and some more votes coming up. But I appreciate the gentleman.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we look back over the recent events that have been happening with Russia, there is no good news. Things keep getting worse. We have dangerous and aggressive nuclear threats and exercises directed against the United States, NATO allies, and its neighbors. We have Putin himself conducting nuclear weapons exercises. Imagine if our president conducted a nuclear weapons exercise, what international criticism there would be, but yet they defy that criticism and go to the next step of even adopting an openly discussed doctrine that Russia intends to use nuclear weapons early in a conflict to what they call de-escalate and get the United States to back down, which is just inconceivable in my mind, that someone would think the use of nuclear weapons is a de-escalation, because our doctrine, of course, is it is an escalation. Russia continues to brazenly violate the INF Treaty as well as numerous other arms control obligations without a response from the U.S. and the INF Treaty. Not to mention the invasion and occupation and annexation of Crimea and the steadily more overt actions that they're taking for hybrid warfare in eastern Ukraine. So, Admiral Winnefeld, what message would you want to send to the American public and to our allies, and in contrast directly to Putin, about the dangerous path that Russia is taking?
Thank you for the question. I think you've made a fairly good message yourself in your question. I would say it's very important that the Russians understand that far from being de-escalatory, first use of nuclear weapons in a conflict like that, it risks uncontrolled escalation. The Russians are good mathematicians. They should consult chaos theory and things like that, that it's almost impossible to completely predict what the outcome would be of such a use of nuclear weapons, however small. So they need to understand that we're not falling for this trap. We are determined to protect and defend our allies within the commitments we've made to the NATO alliance, and we will do that. And bluster and threats of use of nuclear weapons, as Deputy Secretary Work said in his opening statement, are destined to fail. We will not let that deter us from defending our allies.
Well, thank you, Admiral. I appreciate those strong words. When you look at Russia's actions, hybrid warfare, aggressive behavior, invading Ukraine, occupying Crimea, threatening NATO and non-NATO nations with nuclear retaliation and military action if they participate in either NATO or in missile defense deployment, and then with the buzzing of ships and aircrafts and the approaching in very aggressive manner, both our allies and our NATO allies. What do you believe the risks are of a conflict in Europe with Russia, and with Russia's announced doctrine of seeing nuclear weapons as de-escalatory, and they're practicing the use of those weapons? What do you see of the risk of such a conflict escalating to a nuclear exchange?
Sir, I'd obviously want to defer to an intelligence person to really crisply assess the risk of something like that happening. So in my non-intelligence role, the risk is certainly not smaller than it used to be, based on all the rhetoric and all the actions that President Putin and Russia have taken. But I do think they understand that we have a red line there. I do think they understand that we've got considerable capability to frustrate any moves that he might make in Europe. And at the end of the day, I believe that they will take that very seriously. We can't let down our guard in that regard in any way, shape, or form, and we're not. That's why we're investing more in the European Reassurance Initiative. Our very capable commander of European Command, who also happens to be SACEUR, is very active in reassuring our allies and taking the right steps, we believe, to make sure that reassurance is backed with actual capability.
Admiral, I appreciate those strong words, because I think that in the rhetoric from Russia, its hybrid warfare that is undertaken, its aggressiveness, its threats to its neighbors, its deployment of new and threatening systems, and in the exercises that it's undertaking, they need to hear those words from the United States, that our military is strong and that we view our obligations to our allies as absolute. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you. Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony today. Mr. Work, I want to just sort of focus on your comments on the Ohio replacement program, which, again, you say all the right things about the fact that there's going to be this relatively short period of cost that is going to capsize the normal levels of the shipbuilding account. You know, somebody who's been on Sea Power for the last 8 years, frankly, we've had that testimony over and over again, and there are many times I sympathize with the administration coming up here and talking about sequestration, because that's our job to fix that. But in this case, I would like to just sort of observe that what we have done on this side in terms of Ohio is actually set up a mechanism to try and provide a positive solution to the problem. And so we set up the account last year. This year we're actually talking about activating the account and also empowering the Navy through incremental purchasing authority, multi-year purchasing authority, to really give them the tools to deal with this very challenging cost issue, which everybody, again, says the right things, that it's the highest priority for our nation. And again, if we don't do it, we're gonna drain the other conventional forces. This morning, in fact, General Dunford spoke to the Shipbuilding Caucus and spent a large portion of his remarks about the fact that we need to deal with this. We had a surface combatant hearing last week where Admiral Mercado came over, same thing. The conversation just always migrates to this issue. And so there were 2 high-profile amendments on the floor of the House. Mr. Forbes, who's not here, and myself and others, on a bipartisan basis, led the charge to protect this upgrade of the fund. 321 to 111, 74% in the House Republican caucus, 74% in the House Democratic caucus. So people are actually starting to get to the point where we as your comments are, we need to think about this. I mean, we're past that, very frankly. We're ready to act. And what I'm asking you is that, if you don't like the Sea-Based Deterrence Fund, fine, then, but come back to us with something. But, you just get the impression that the budget planners at the Pentagon and the administration are just spectators here in terms of us trying to come up with a fix to this that will avoid all of the negative fallout, which, again, you described very powerfully here this morning. So I was just wondering if you could, just share what your thoughts in terms of our work that we're doing on this, in terms of whether, at some point you guys are prepared to embrace it and help us advance what I think is a solution that has precedent in the past in terms of the Sea Lift Fund and ground-based missile defense.
Thank you, sir. This is our #1 mission. We're going to pay for it no matter what. In the past, the Congress has added money for strategic modernization during periods of these times where we're starting to recapitalize, and we hope that is going to happen again. And we very much appreciate the theory of the case behind this fund. We believe that there is going to have to be something like that to help us through. As I said, up until this time, it has been theoretical. In 2021, as you know, sir, the first Ohio replacement, we pay for. If we paid for it all in that single year, it would be a $7 billion add to the Navy, and they average only about $15 to $16 billion a year in their entire shipbuilding account. It would be enormously destructive to the Navy to have to fit that in within their top line. So we want to work with you, and we are anxious to work with you on figuring out how to do this. But I just wanted to foot stomp what something that the Vice Chairman said. It's one thing saying that we would eat it within a fixed top line. That would cause enormous disruption to our program, not just in the Navy, but across all of our services. So we're anxious to work with you, sir, and we need to do it.
Well, I'd like to tease out a little more from you because, again, what we've done is create a mechanism within the budget process, again, giving, I think, the incremental authority, all the tools that we know worked with Virginia and carriers, and I hope at some point, the powers that be are going to kind of spit it out here in terms of whether or not they're willing to use this fund, which obviously the huge vote in Congress shows that we're ready, and in fact we're moving forward, and we hope that the administration is going to help us solve this problem. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all the witnesses. And Admiral Winnefeld, thank you very much for your service. Congratulations on retirement, upcoming retirement. 2 weeks ago, this committee received the State Department's second straight non-compliance report about Russia's violation of the INF Treaty. And for many years prior to these last 2 years' official reports, we had evidence of their non-compliance. And it's against that backdrop that I want to ask this. The committee learned in December that the Joint Staff was conducting an assessment of possible military responses to Russia's non-compliance. And my understanding is that that assessment, and you briefed us on that assessment, by the way, in March, and we appreciate that. It's my understanding that Chairman Dempsey has forwarded proposed responses to the President. Admiral Winnefeld, do you have a time frame that you can suggest to us that you will get some direction from the White House as to military responses to Russia's continued INF violations?
Sir, I don't have a specific timeline for you. I know it's something that the interagency policy committees and so on are looking at, consulting with allies on. I don't think that we want to necessarily rush into a definitive move because we would like to bring Russia back into this treaty. But there's no question, as you point out, that we've got options at hand that I can't really discuss in an unclassified hearing, but those options are available for use. Some of them are expensive. None of them contribute to Russia's security, and they need to understand that. They need to come back inside this treaty.
In all difference, we're not rushing into anything. This has been going on for years. It's just the last 2 years that the administration's officially recognized it. He is playing us along, and we're just letting him. And I just don't understand why it continues to go on. I know you're not the president, and you can't tell him what to do, but we need to be making some decisions and doing something proactively, which leads me to my next question. I'm really worried about, Secretary Work talked about the provocative statements, and I think you made reference to it, that the Russian military leadership has made toward our NATO allies, trying to jar their resolve. And I'm worried about them fracturing NATO. So I guess my question is, what is the U.S. doing to alert our NATO allies to the seriousness of Russia's violation and the threat that they pose? And then what are we doing to reassure them that we're going to be there and everything's going to be okay?
Sir, we've had very close consultations with our NATO partners on the nature of the Russian violation of the INF Treaty. They're well aware of that, the fact of, and that we still remain deeply committed to our Article 5 obligations with NATO. Secretary Carter's over there today with the NATO ministerial. I'm sure he's discussing this with them both in the major forums and also on his pull-asides that he has with various NATO leaders. But the NATO leadership there of the various partners and of the NATO command structure are very well aware of this and very well aware that we are determined to not permit the violation of the INF Treaty to create a greater threat to NATO than currently exists.
Do you believe, because I was just there, I've been there twice in Eastern Europe in the last 6 months, most recently with the full committee chairman. They're very concerned about our resolve. Do you believe that we are being muscular enough in our military posture in the region to reassure them?
I would challenge their concerns about our resolve. We are trying to help buttress their resolve. We are one of the very few nations in NATO that has met the 2% investment obligation of GDP. Secretary Carter's over there right now encouraging the rest of them. And in fact, that's quite a topic of discussion right now in Brussels in terms of getting the rest of the alliance to reach its commitment of 2% of GDP funding for defense. So we are reassuring them. They should be well aware of our firm commitment based on what we've done lately with the European Reassurance Initiative, thankfully with the support of Congress, and all of the actions that we've been taking.
They see that very inadequate, and we met with defense ministers and presidents of 4 different Eastern European countries, allies, and they see that as a limp-wristed reassurance, the ERI. And but anyway, my time has expired. I look forward to my next series of questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Garamendi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take this in a little different direction, and my questions will go to Secretary Sherwood-Randall. And they deal with the new pit facilities. And if you could explain the rationale behind the need for 50 to 80 capacity, the cost associated with that, and then a discussion of the need. Well, let's go there, and then another question after that.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. I'll begin by noting that in the questions that have recently been asked, for example, by Chairman Rogers, we understand the need for a fully responsive nuclear infrastructure given the dynamic threat environment that we face. And one aspect of that approved by the Nuclear Weapons Council is the plutonium strategy, which requires us to meet certain targets in terms of production of plutonium pits over the coming decades. That strategy will enable us to move out of an old facility built in 1952 by 2019 at Los Alamos and produce up to 30 plutonium pits per year by 2026, which will be necessary to ensure that we can continue our life extension programs, and construct and operate additional capabilities to produce up to 50 to 80 pits by 2030. Again, giving us the flexibility, should we need it, given the dynamic threat environment,
And the cost?
to utilize those pits. And the cost associated with those pits, with that strategy, I will have to come back to you with an answer
It would seem to me
for the record.
you would want to know that at the outset. There seems to be some shortage of money for all of this. So what's the cost?
So, as you have heard, we face very significant budgetary challenges on this front, and the requirement for investment to enable us to have a responsive infrastructure is significant.
Has the committee considered revamping, updating the existing facility?
We did consider that in the scrutiny that the Secretary and I and the National Nuclear Security Administration leadership have applied to the planning for major infrastructure projects has been very significant. And what we have done is set up a whole new process for examining the kinds of buildings that we need to build to recapitalize that infrastructure to ensure that we do it in the most effective way from a taxpayer perspective.
It seems to me that the starting point of this is somebody decided you needed capacity 50, now it's 80 pits a year, if I just heard you correctly. And then you backed from there into a facility to accomplish that. But you've not yet told me why you need 50 to 80 new pits a year.
Thank you for seeking clarification on this. The objective is to give us the flexibility to produce additional plutonium
Why
pits should
do we
we
need
need
the
them.
flexibility?
Because we cannot predict the threat environment that we will face as a nation 10, 20, or 30 years from now, and we want to make sure that we have the infrastructure necessary to respond should a president of the future need to pursue the modernization of our nuclear capabilities in light of those threats.
Someday we might want it, and therefore we're going to build it now, and we don't have the money to do so.
We can't snap our fingers and produce the infrastructure and the human talent required
What
to
is the
support this
capacity of the
program.
current pit production facility?
It
at
is
Los
much
Alamos?
lower. It's
And it
much
is
lower.
what number?
And I will have to get back to you.
It's somewhere between 10 and 20.
But I want to confirm it precisely.
And that's
to you,
one
so I'll
shift
do
a
that.
day. Multiple shifts, upgrade of the existing facility could produce far more than the 10 or so today. Check it out and get back to me, please.
I promise to do that.
Thank you. I think I'm out of time, but there's a whole series of other questions having to do with the MOX facility, and specifically on the question of the September report. Is it online? Is it moving forward? And can we expect to see it in September?
Would you like me to get back to you for the record on that?
No, I'd like an answer now. You ought to know.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you said you were out of time. May we continue?
You got 22 seconds.
Okay, I'll try to speak quickly then. So as you know, both the Senate and the House have asked us to do additional review of the costs of the MOX facility. And we are going to conduct a red team review with the director of our Oak Ridge National Lab to evaluate the aerospace report findings and other findings about the costs associated with this facility to determine the best way forward.
Okay, so that's due in September.
It is correct.
Thank you. And finally, yes, I will take for the record the costs.
I will
Thank
get
you.
them to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bridenstine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to discuss the Open Skies Treaty. We had a hearing not too long ago called Worldwide Threats, and it was on February 3rd. Lieutenant General Stewart, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, was asked about the Open Skies Treaty. The general said this. He said, "The Open Skies construct was designed for a different era. I am very concerned about how it is applied today, and I'd love to talk about it in a closed hearing." We had the chairman of my subcommittee, Mr. Rogers, send a request for information to Admiral Haney, commander of U.S. STRATCOM, and his letter came back and it said, "I agree with Lieutenant General Stewart, director of DIA, in his assertion that the Open Skies construct was designed for a different era." He goes on to say that Russia's application today has gone beyond the original intent of the treaty. He says the United States, in concert with our allies, continues to address these concerns. He says, "I am concerned the treaty has become a critical component of Russia's intelligence collection capability directed at the United States. In addition to overflying military installations, Russia's Open Skies flights can overfly and collect on DoD and national critical infrastructure." Deputy Secretary Work, are you aware that the most recent compliance report from the Department of State indicates Russia is not in compliance with this treaty?
I am, sir, and this is something that we'd really like to talk about in a closed hearing, but we are concerned about what Russia is doing, as well as all of their other intelligence activities that are focused on our nuclear mission.
Do you have any reason to believe the Russians are using the treaty for reasons beyond what it was ratified for?
We are concerned on the way they are operating, as Admiral Haney said. We think that they're going beyond the original intent of the treaty, and we continue to look at this one very, very closely.
So the Russians have requested that we continue this treaty and that they are able to use even more advanced sensors. Do you believe it is prudent to accede to Russian proposals to fly increasingly advanced sensors over the United States?
That's in discussion right now, sir, inside the department.
So would you say that you don't have an opinion on that at this point, or?
Not until we look at all of the different aspects.
Okay. This is an issue that is going to continue to be of high interest. I know it to me, and of course to the chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, Mr. Rogers, whose committee I'm honored to serve on. Also for you, Deputy Secretary Work, is Russia modernizing its nuclear forces to include developing and deploying new types of ICBMs and submarine-launched ballistic missiles?
Yes, they are undergoing, as the Vice Chairman said, a wide-ranging modernization of their entire nuclear force.
Is China modernizing, including new types of ICBMs and SLBMs?
Yes, they are modernizing both the warheads that are on their silo-based missiles as well as deploying road mobile missiles.
Are we, as the United States, modernizing to include new types of ICBMs and SLBMs?
Right now, our modernization plan is to replace the Minuteman III with a ground-based strategic deterrent, to replace our Trident force with the Ohio replacement platforms, to replace our bombers with the long-range bomber, and to replace our air-launched cruise missile with the long-range, new long-range.
So we are maintaining our current strategic deterrent while they are creating new and more advanced strategic deterrent capabilities. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's just on their timeline, the Russian timeline. Their system started to age out before ours, so they're in the midst of their modernization cycle, as the Vice Chairman said. Our cycle is coming up in the 2020s and early 2030s.
So, but remember, they are advancing beyond where they currently are, and we are staying stagnant. Is that correct? I mean, I understand we're modernizing what we currently have, but we're not creating any new technologies.
They are, again, they're replacing old systems with new systems. That is correct, Congressman. And but they're staying within the New START in our estimation, so they're not increasing the size of their force.
I've just got a few seconds left. I heard you earlier. You mentioned that that there was. We'll take it offline. We'll ask questions later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Appreciate it. If the gentleman wishes to submit questions in writing, of course, I'm sure the witnesses will be able to respond. Ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being absent earlier. I had a physical this morning that went on and on and on and on. It took forever. I wanted to be sure and be here for one thing to thank Admiral Winnefeld for his service. And, you know, we've joked with General Dempsey. We've had numerous last hearings for him. So we dare not make a prediction. You may be back. Who knows? But if this is your last hearing, just want to thank you very much for a great working relationship and for your service. You've done a fantastic job. And following up on the last point there, Russia may be modernizing, but a nuclear weapon's a nuclear weapon. It's pretty powerful. We have, you know, I think 4,800 and some odd of them, and submarine-based, ICM-based, bomber-based. It's not like the Russians are building something that gives them some new technical advantage, correct?
I think the only exception to that would concern me is that the greater shift towards mobile missiles in their ICBM force. Their submarine-launched ballistic missile force, even with their improvements, is not as good as ours.
Sure.
Their bomber leg is not as good as ours, but I think the mobile missiles is probably of a greater concern.
But the advantage of the mobile thing is it would be hard for us to hit it in a first strike. But with 4,800 nuclear weapons, we could hit them pretty hard, even if we couldn't necessarily hit the mobile nuclear missiles, correct?
They are not invulnerable, yes, sir.
Yeah, and so I think that the larger point, and we get bogged down in this modernization debate, and I think the more important debate is what is our deterrence strategy? Because look, if it comes to it, A, bad all bad, no matter what. B, we got plenty of firepower under just about any scenario that you're going to see to basically destroy the planet in combination, with whatever the Russians do. Now, we have to make sure that we maintain that we upgrade systems that are failing, falling offline, and all that. And I understand all of that. But I think obsessing over, oh my gosh, they're a little bit more mobile, or they've got it's a nuclear weapon, which I forget the number, but it's like thousands of times more powerful than either of the bombs we dropped on Japan in World War II. So it's a pretty significant deterrent. I think the larger, more difficult question is, what is our deterrence policy, and how well do we understand that within the Pentagon? And, we had deterrence policy during the Cold War, which was basically, we felt that the Soviets had us, outmanned in Europe conventionally. And so part of our deterrence policy was, you go too far in Western Europe and we'll nuke you. And it worked. I mean, they went into Czechoslovakia, they went into Hungary, they pushed the envelope a little bit. But what is our policy on, when we would do first use? What if they go into a NATO country and start messing with them? And I would also, I'm interested in the answer to that question, and I would suggest that communication between us and the Russians and us and the Chinese, the Russians being far more important, whatever our differences may be on a wide range of other subjects, a robust communication to make sure that those differences don't lead to us destroying the planet is something that I think should be a huge part of our deterrence strategy. That's why I don't have a problem, even with the differences that we have with China, that we do a joint. We do some joint military exercises. We worked with Russia on Afghanistan. We worked with Russia. We're doing the P5+1 negotiations on Iran. Anything that can make sure that we communicate and don't, inadvertently start Armageddon because of a lack of communications, I think should be a huge part of our deterrence policy. But what is our deterrence policy in terms of use of nuclear weapons, and what is our understanding of Russia's deterrence policy?
Well, right now our policy is to achieve nuclear parity with Russia, and that is established under the New START Treaty.
Right.
We do not assess that China is trying to achieve parity with either us. The primary role of our nuclear mission, our nuclear forces, is to deter an attack on the continental United States, our allies, and our partners. We state very clearly that the use of nuclear weapons will cross an escalatory red line. We do not make explicit what our reactions would be, but we do say that we have the full force of our nuclear arsenal behind us to respond as needed and as the President directs. So our policy is to deter an attack on the United States and try to reduce the role of nuclear weapons in our normal national security strategy around the world.
Because Russia now has the conventional disadvantage that we at least perceived ourselves to have during portions of the Cold War. So one of the concerns is that if they feel that they're conventionally outgunned, they might go the nuclear route. And we communicate clearly to them that that will receive a proportional response, regardless of how they view the conventional situation. That is part of our deterrence strategy. If you use a nuke against anybody, then you got at least one coming back at you.
It's a very important point, sir. Whenever your conventional and your nuclear deterrence capabilities get out of whack, you tend to rely on one or the other. Right. And the Russians believe that we have a significant conventional force advantage, and therefore they rely more on their nuclear weapons as a deterrent. What we are concerned about is the way they explain their escalatory posture. Right. We believe that is extremely problematic and something that I agree with you that we need to be constantly talking with the leaders of Russia to say we do not want this to lead to a miscalculation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for your thoughtful remarks today. My question is related to, I want to turn to North Korea and Iran. North Korea is continuing to grow a small arsenal of nuclear and advanced missiles. Recently, North Korea claimed that it has tested a new type of missile from a submarine and that they had built a nuclear warhead small enough to be mounted on a long-range missile. Then you have Iran's proliferation of nuclear weapons capability. And as we're on the precipice of a potential deal with the Obama administration, which would allow Iranian production of nuclear fuel to continue, these are very real threats we have today, and it is my belief that we need all possible capabilities available to deter and protect our own national security and our allies. Just this week, Admiral Haney reaffirmed his commitment to strong deterrence against potential threats by North Korea. So I'm wondering, at this point, when some of our most important strategic weapon systems are aging, what do you think this says about our priorities?
Well, we believe, as we have said over and over, that nuclear deterrence is our #1 mission. We take it very seriously. We believe that we do have a strong nuclear deterrent. Our force today is, we believe, the best nuclear force on the planet, period. The modernization recycle that is coming up in the 20s is something that we need to face together to make sure that it stays at that point. We're absolutely confident that we can stay ahead of the capabilities that the North Koreans And as the President said, we are absolutely committed to preventing them from acquiring a nuclear weapon.
Thank you. My next question, I wanted to ask about the President's decision to reject de-alerting the U.S. ICBM forces. President Obama's nuclear employment guidance rejects the notion of de-alerting U.S. nuclear forces while continuing to examine options to reduce the role of launch under attack in U.S. planning. Can you explain why the President made this decision?
It's very simple that when everyone de-alerts, the race to alert, it becomes escalatory and provides incentives for another side to try to preempt before you can raise your alert level. Therefore, it was decided that a de-alert posture would actually raise the possibility of a miscalculation, and we decided against that.
Are there any other comments from the other witnesses?
I'd just say there is an awful lot of folklore out there regarding the alert piece of this, that it puts our nuclear weapons on a hair trigger. And the fact of the matter is that they're not on a hair trigger. The system is designed such that there's exquisite control over the employment of a nuclear weapon. The President is the only person who can actually authorize that, and it is not possible to launch one unless he does that. You can't have a rogue actor down there somewhere in a silo actually launching a weapon. So the benefits of de-alerting in terms of preventing an accidental launch are very small, where the drawbacks that Deputy Secretary Work pointed out are substantial.
We do open ocean targeting of our submarine launch ballistic missiles, and we have de-alerted our bombers. So we do believe we've taken the prudent steps to make sure that we we're de-emphasizing a hair trigger response, as the Vice Chairman said, but we thought that de-alerting ICBMs would actually cause us more problems than it would solve.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Admiral Winnefeld, thank you very much for your service, all your contributions to our national security. I wanted to go back to my colleague, Mr. Langevin's question about verification and detection and the importance of that. He had quoted the 2014 Defense Science Board, which concluded that much work does remain to be done on verification and detection technologies and interagency cooperation. And we're talking about our own country, not working with our allies at this time. Do you agree with that? Do you think that there is much? And what are those specific gaps that we need to be sure that we're doing so that we're picking up the problems that exist in the technology and sensors, all that we're using in verification?
Ma'am, I'm going to have to review the DSB study. We're very confident that our verification measures for the New START treaty are quite good. And as you know, as we are dealing with Iran, being transparent and verifiable are the absolute two key pillars of what we're trying to do. So I'm not certain of what the DSB said, but I'll be happy to review it and get back with you.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Are you familiar? Okay. And then we've talked a lot about the modernizing, recapitalization. I think people have had some, different thoughts about that. But I think one of the concerns, at least on the surface, would be that the NSA submits a 25-year plan for how we're going to deal with these issues, and yet the Department of Defense does not. So I think the concern, how is the DoD planning beyond 2025? What is it that we're doing even to think about reducing costs? Because we know that in many situations we have costs that go far out of the realm of what initially was planned. How are we going to manage peak spending? And we may see some of these programs converging as well. Where are we in that? And is that a criticism that's justified in terms of the Department of Defense and not doing that planning that far out, knowing that we're looking at an awfully lot of money here?
Congresswoman, we do have a good understanding of what we need to do over the course of the next 20 years. The Ohio replacement program starts first. We'll start replacing our Trident boats first. Then will come the LRSO along with the bomber in the mid-20s. And then will come the ground-based strategic deterrent, which we have to, the Minuteman starts to age out in 2030. We also have a nuclear capability for the F-35, which is planned for a future flight. So we understand the general costs of all these. We understand how they will unfold. 20-year cost estimates are uncertain, but we can provide you with our estimates over this period. We're quite confident we understand what we have to replace, the timing we have to replace, and the rough costs that will require us now.
Is there, do you think, though, in terms of working along the same lines of NSSA, that you're meeting those requirements?
Ma'am, we have a very good discussion through the avenue of the Nuclear Weapons Council with NNSA. And we, I think, do a pretty good job of trying to synchronize our programs. And the LRSO is a classic example of trying to make sure that the life extension program for the W-80 warhead would be synchronized well with the introduction of that new weapon system. So, and we submit a 5-year future years defense plan, which is a detailed program, but we plan well beyond that. The program managers, the services, and the like have very detailed understanding of how those programs propagate out through decades, to include life cycle costs and the whole piece. And we'd be happy to come brief you on that if you'd like.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Thank you again for your service.
I had just a handful of follow-ups. Ms. Secretary, editorial comment, saying something is a red line doesn't quite have the punch it once did. And I think that's part of Mr. Rogers' point about allies who are concerned about our reliability. And so that's at least what we hear as we travel, not just in Eastern Europe, but in other places. Admiral, I want to take advantage of 37 years on a question. Obviously, at one point, the subject of nuclear deterrence received a tremendous amount of attention, intellectual energy, planning, and then it didn't. And while understandably we have been focused so much on terrorism and other challenges, now we're having to kind of not reinvent, but to develop those skills again, to put that emphasis, I think, on nuclear deterrence and its credibility, which is really, to me, the key characteristic in all of this. So I'd be interested in your view. Are we there where we need to, as far as especially the intellectual planning and firepower on nuclear deterrence?
I think that's an excellent question, point well taken. And the way I would approach the answer is that across the broad intellectual base of the military, let's say, especially in the senior officers corps, I would say 05 and above, how steeped have we educated our broad workforce in nuclear deterrence matters? When they attend war colleges, they get a good dose of it, and they may hear about it, read particular articles and the like on their own. But I would tend to agree with you that over the last 15 years or so, particularly since we've been in the post-9/11 era, that a substantial share of our intellectual bandwidth has been shifted over towards counterterrorism and the like. I would also say, though, that in the niche that is the nuclear business, and I have a wonderful Air Force officer here with me, Major General Tom Bouchier, who's grown up in that business. They're still doing pretty well. The Strategic Command folks, the Air Force, Navy, nuclear deterrence community has retained its interest and focus on this particular mission. So I think we're doing okay in that stovepipe, but I think your point is well taken, that we need to make sure that we are emerging from this last 15 years that we've been in and make sure that the broader force has a robust understanding of this question. It's a good point.
Well, especially as the Russians seem to broaden the circumstances under which at least they threaten to use nuclear weapons. I want to ask one other question here about this idea that a nuke is a nuke is a nuke. I'm old enough to remember a debate in the 1970s about a neutron bomb, which is a nuke, but it has very different characteristics than the existing weapons that we have. And my understanding is a variety of actors around the world are developing new weapons in the sense that it's not just replacing what they had, but it is adding weapons with some different characteristics, which gets, in my mind, back to this credibility issue. And as you know, the argument has been that our very large nuclear weapons that were designed for a Cold War exchange are not as credible as other weapons might be in a different strategic landscape. Would you care to comment on that?
Yes, sir. Two things. One, I would say that we do have a range of, for lack of a better word, dialability in some of our weapons, so that we do have low-yield weapons that we can call upon to for the President to use if he sees fit. So we don't have a lot of work going on in vastly different weapons, like a neutron weapon or something like that. But in terms of the scale of scalability of a nuclear detonation, we can cover that fairly well. What I spend more of my time worrying about is the delivery systems, making sure that they are modern in the sense of reliable. They're not old, but they're also incorporating new technology. And I would contend that the systems that we are developing now to deliver these weapons, should it be necessary, hopefully it won't be, are very advanced. The LRS-B is going to be a very advanced bomber. The Ohio replacement submarine is going to be very quiet. It's going to be a very capable boat. And the ground-based strategic deterrent will, of course, be better than what we have now. So we are making more than just incremental, but less than, major changes in how we deliver these things. But I also think we have the array of scalability on our nuclear weapons where we need it to be.
Yeah, I just think, as Ms. Davis said, I think there gets to be a little confusion. We talk about modernizing. Well, it's one thing to replace something with something that's just like it, but as you point out, whether we're talking delivery systems or the warheads themselves, our adversaries are not, Russians, for example, are not replacing a system with the exact same system, just made newer. It has different characteristics, and I think we have to keep that in mind. Madam Secretary, I want to get back to responsive infrastructure right quick. A lot of what we have under New START is a lot fewer weapons, but part of the agreement was we would have a more responsive infrastructure and ability to respond quickly to ensure that this deterrent remains credible. Now, you would not say that we have a responsive infrastructure today, right?
I believe we do have a responsive infrastructure today, but we must make the investments that I described in my statement that I submitted, as well as my opening remarks. We need to ensure that we retain the capabilities that Admiral Winnefeld and you have just had an exchange about this on the delivery system side. Similarly, on the weapons production side, we need to retain the workforce and we need the infrastructure to support them. And that's the intellectual workforce that we're discussing. The people who are doing the work right now on stockpile stewardship and on modernization are the very people we need to invest in. We need to recruit the next generation of people who will do that work in the future to ensure that we have that responsive infrastructure for decades to come. And so I would say now we have what we need, but we have put forward to you an historic budget on this front in this 2016 request to ensure that we're making the investments we need going forward to retain that responsive infrastructure. Because we did suffer, unfortunately, following the New START agreement, from a cutback in the kind of investment that we anticipated in advancing that agreement.
Well, I certainly do not want to diminish the importance of the budget request the administration sent up this year, because I do think it's turned things around. But I'm not sure that I'm with you on that our infrastructure is as responsive as it needs to be today, because I just see too much evidence, not only of the people retiring, other people choosing other lines of work, and a variety of problems, some of which we've kind of touched on today, but others of which we haven't.
Mr. Chairman, I think together we need to signal to people that this matters.
Yeah.
You're doing that by virtue of holding this hearing. My colleagues and I do it by the work we do every day, and I look forward to working together with you to ensure that we continue to send that signal across our nation.
Well, I think that's a very important point, and maybe that's a good point to end on, because I do think whether we're talking about the intellectual bandwidth for nuclear deterrence, whether we're talking about attracting the best scientists to work in our nuclear weapons labs and plants, people need to know that this is the most important element of our nation's security, and it will continue to be, and it will receive the investment that is deserving of that. And so if there's one point I think we hopefully all agree on, it is that we need to continue to attract the best and the brightest and have facilities that can meet the unexpected, because as these machines age, there will be more unexpected. Thank you all for being here. I very much appreciate your testimony and look forward to working with you all at least for a month or longer. So thank you. With that, the hearing stands adjourned.